This podcast is sponsored by Communicate and Connect Counseling, where we have a team of therapists who provide individual, couples, and family therapy services, all tailored to meet the needs of military and veteran families. To learn more about our services, visit www.communicateandconnect.com. Hey everyone, welcome back to the Communicate and Connect podcast. This is episode 55 on attachment theory and domestic violence with Jeff Slootmakers. Hey Jeff, I'm so glad to have you here today. For people who don't know, Jeff is an EFT trainer, and I think everybody knows what EFT is, emotionally focused couples therapy, because we've talked a lot about it on this podcast. And he is one of the EFT trainers that does a lot of work around intimate partner violence. And so I'm really excited that you're here so we can talk about this and really hopefully help give military couples like a way forward if this is happening in their relationships. But maybe you could just share a little bit about yourself, Jeff, and kind of
Yeah,
what you do in this area.
yeah, welcome. And hello, Liz. Yeah, so thanks for the invitation. What to say about me? Maybe interesting for the listeners, as I just mentioned to you as well. I'm so happy to talk about this, but it will be in my third language. So maybe we need to ask people some forgiveness and some patience about me saying sometimes like really strange things with a weird accent. But anyway, what about me? I think the most important thing is that I'm actually a regular dude who, by accident, became very passionate about what I'm doing these days, which is applying and bringing EFT to couples, families, and individuals who suffer with anger and trauma and violence. And I came to it actually by accident. And later on, I thought maybe it isn't a coincidence that it really hit me and that I became so passionate about it because now what I'm trying to do as a professional, I think I tried to do that as a little kid too.
Mm.
Into when I was in my core family, and then after they divorced, and I had like several kinds of combined families, and they changed always during the time. But one of the things that was always there were intense conflicts and anger and pain and unpredictability that comes a lot with the dynamics of intimate partner violence. And I think already from very young, I just tried to navigate that and provide the family with as much as safety as I could. Um, but that was a hard task to do as a 7-year old or a 14-year-old or a 16-year-old. And then there was a moment I said, like, I don't ever want to do something like that. And so I just left home and all of a sudden I was working with families who were suffering under the same dynamics. And then I get like really enthusiastic about it, found EFT, became like really passionate about it, became a supervisor trainer in Belgium. And now for the past 20 years, I'm just really focused on bringing hope to those families who sometimes really suffer under aggressive dynamics. And I try to look for how can anger and aggressive outbursts in couples, how can it be related to attachment and in fact even loving each other, which sounds a big deal,
Hmm.
but it can be two sides of the same coin, having strong conflicts and at the same time still loving each other.
Yeah, I'm hoping we're gonna go into that more because I'm just thinking about, well, I have a few thoughts going through my mind. I'm thinking about my original training in couples therapy was so much like if there's violence going on, don't work on that. send them to like a domestic violence shelter, get them out of the relationship. Don't help the couple be together. And when I'm in well, I guess Facebook groups are such a common thing for military spouses, and so military spouses will just connect on Facebook so much.
Mhm.
And often there are posts in these groups about like violence that happened. Should I leave? And a lot of the advice is often like, you need to leave. And but I remember from your training, Jeff, that a lot of people don't actually leave, that they stay
Yeah.
in the relationship. And I think that to me meant that it's worth helping people when they choose to stay in situations like that.
Well, yeah, that's a lot we were just talking about. And yeah, I remember I worked for almost 4 years in a shelter for women and kids. And what I remember there is that 7 to 8 out of 10 people who came to the shelter returned home within a couple of days or weeks. And then back then, my colleagues, me as a young social worker, I was not even a therapist back then, but they were talking to me. You see, they're still too dependent, you know, and they can't break up yet. And probably back then, we had the rule in the shelter people can come in like 8 times with the idea maybe they need several rounds before they can finally, leave the relationship. And so I was really interested about it. So I started asking those women, like, hey, you're telling me that you want to leave the shelter and you want to go back. Is it because you're still too dependent? Is it that you're too afraid? And you know what? Most of them, they said to me, no, I still love him. I miss him. And what I've learned rather quickly is that when there was a storm, a relational storm with big outbursts, with shouting, yelling, calling names, even physical incidents or aggressive behaviors, it's so impactful that it really scares the hell out of us because it's so scary because you're fighting with the man or the woman that you really love, and all of a sudden you get scared by that dynamic, or you get scared by the look in his eyes, or what he or she has been telling to you, or it's just really such a crack in that foundation of safety, and it scares, and you don't want to be there. So
Mhm.
people say, I want to leave in that moment. But most of the time they say, I want to leave those fights.
Yeah.
But it's something else that I want to leave the relationship. Uh, and one of the things in the field that there has been much discussion about it, but one of the things that is really clear in the scientific field of intimate partner violence that we need to consider at least two forms of intimate partner violence, which also will help to tackle these questions that come with leaving or not. Because when we consider that intimate partner violence is just not always one dynamic, at least there are two. Um, and we talk about those dynamics as the cold and the warm form. And that cold form is a kind of relational dynamic where it's not even a dynamic. That's a kind of relationship where one partner really objectifies and controls the other totally. It's about power. It's a dynamic really where there's a lot of use of power because of the power. But that is a total different dynamic where people get caught in fights and power dynamics where they use power because they're powerless, because they don't know how to reach each other anymore,
Mm.
because they really don't know how can I be a good husband? How can I be a good wife to you? How can I provide in a good way for my family? I don't know how I can get my care and my love for you. How do I get it across? I don't know anymore. Or I don't know anymore how I can be good to you because it seems like every day I'm failing. And I'm so overwhelmed with those emotions, drowning in that powerless feeling that I have nothing to hold on to. And the only thing I can do is just fight my way out of that feeling.
Mm.
Then we start seeing power dynamics and the use of power, but the motivation is actually an attachment drama. And that's something totally different than the other form, which is the use of power because of you want to control and have the power over the other one.
The intentions are really different. Um,
Yes. Yeah.
yeah.
And I think it's important because if you consider that distinction, I know it's a simplification of reality as always, right? But then because I do really believe that with the really cold form where power because of the power, I think it's important sometimes that we help people to leave a relationship and they really need the help to, you know, find the boundaries and the safety again and found back the integrity about, hey, me as a self, I don't deserve to be seen as an object, you know,
Yeah.
and I have the right to come up for my own integrity and my own safety. And so sometimes they really need help. But the interesting piece is that that's only the smallest form of intimate partner violence because the biggest group where the or the yeah the biggest form is that other where
Mm.
people get caught in attachment dramas where they start losing the sense of loving each other and then get caught in fights and don't know how to deal with it and then get caught in escalations. That's where the anger and the aggression takes place. And that needs a different approach.
Yeah. I'm just thinking what a difficult spot. Like if there's violence happening in my relationship, like to figure that out or to know like which version it is or to like decide whether or not to leave. But I think you mentioned hope earlier, and I feel like that's the main feeling I have as we're talking about it because I think before it would be like, well, I just have to leave. But now I'm like with what we're talking about, there's like this other approach. There's this chance that I could leave the fights, that my partner and I could leave the fights while still being together in our
Yeah.
relationship.
Yeah. And I think that's one of the missions I have as a therapist and then as a trainer, training a lot of psychotherapists, is that we can offer people so much hope if we are more careful with that contraindication. So imagine like someone coming to me or with your community or with people, somebody saying like, "Hey, we are suffering." There's so many stressful There's so many stress layers with, I guess, military people, which I need to say for the audience too. Like, I'm really not an expert in that. Okay, we can talk a little bit less about
Yeah.
what aggression and EPV and intimate partner violence, and I can talk about attachment and EFT. But I really don't know how military life looks like. Okay, because I'm from Europe, I'm from Belgium. We only have like such a small army compared to how it is present in your society. I think most of the listeners would not even be able to imagine that. Okay.
Yeah.
So also in my clients or when I work with social services, there are so less military folks here. Okay, so I don't know, but I did a little bit of the research and there are some elements that are extra stressors, like how fast life can change,
Hmm.
long separations, being deployed, whether for a mission or for exercises or other things I was thinking about is like split obligations, like or hey, I wanna serve my country, and I need to serve my country, and I'm and at the same time, yeah, I want to do good and serve my family too. But how can we combine them? I think it's often very demanding and difficult to combine both.
Yes.
Um, One other thing, other thought that I thought of is like that in order to survive the changing dynamics and what the military is demanding of soldiers is like spouses functioning as a single parent in order to have at least some predictability. And that is good survival. But all those elements combined, they bring in some kind of stress, some attachment related stress, I guess. It's just part of that life, I guess. I mean, although I don't know how that is from the inside, it isn't hard to imagine that these layers really activate our attachment questions and needs. And then I'm not even talking about PTSD or after people coming back from a mission and all the things that they've been seeing. And it also exercises, I mean, the level of stress, and then that transition back home.
Yeah.
It just, it just, it just, it just speaks to the attachment. And you know what? Maybe I don't know if that would be a good idea, but I really like if we want to understand something complex of intimate partner violence, I just really like to keep it simple.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And so, what if we start from those extra stressors in people's lives? You know, for me, and just please correct me because you got more of the experience, right? But for me, it isn't that hard to imagine that when you're waiting for your husband to come back home or and after a mission or after a long separation and yeah, you're looking forward to see him or her, but you don't know how impacted he or she will come back. Right. Also, in the other way around, when you have been away and under a lot of stress, it just makes sense that you want to go back to a safe place. But you've been away for so long. Will they welcome you? Will they open up the door? Will they just say, "Hi, Dad. We're so happy to be home." And this is where I just travel a lot because of my job, because I travel, which I never thought I would be, but I travel all around the world. So there are moments, time of the year where every week I'm gone. I'm for 2 or 3 days. I'm traveling in Europe. I go to another country, do the trainings, and I come back. And some moments I'm I'm away from home like in a week. And every time when I come back, I just long to be back with my kids and my wife and back to my family. But I learned after a couple of years living in that rhythm. Will they welcome me this time? Because I come back and will they just drop whatever they're playing with or whatever they're doing and will they just make time to welcome me? Or will they be in that kind of mode where they say, yeah, you're back, but we're just watching a game and now I'm going to, or watching a movie and I'm going to, in order to have the predictability, it's easier to live like you're not here.
Yeah.
So that readjustment, you know, is challenging. And I'm just talking about me leaving house for doing a training. That's something completely else than doing a mission. Yeah.
Yes. But I think the same dynamic that it's easier to be, it can be easier to be a little detached
Yeah.
because you're going to leave again. And and even if I want to reconnect, there's like a push-pull feeling, at least
Yeah.
I can say for me, of like I want to be in that closeness and I know you're going to leave. And so there's another part of me that wants to stay a little emotionally distant.
Yeah. And that happens in a bidirectionality. Okay. From the other part, it's also, there's nothing more I want. It's just to lean into and feel like calm and loved and safe again, where I just can like, lay down the armor But you know what? In a couple of days, I have to leave again. And that takes so much energy to switch from those modes that, and maybe we'll do something in between, And I think these are all, there's nothing wrong with it. I think now we're talking about extra stressors and context. And I think it would be interesting if I would have more time to have listening rounds with your audience here. I think a lot of them would really learn me how it's just part of life, how it is part of military life, and we're just addressing a couple of things, but probably there are more of those commonalities that belong to this life,
Mhm.
and but they would all activate in a way the attachment system, and it's functional. I mean, what you're saying about that detached piece is just a way of dealing with it. There's nothing wrong with it. I mean, you can love your husband like big time, and still, yeah, because you love him, you need to sometimes detach yourself because otherwise you're too exposed, too vulnerable when the other one is leaving again. And you have to keep on functioning and with the kids and all the other things you need to do. And so that just all makes sense. But what can then happen, and that is probably the audience will know that too, since you're making such a wonderful series in a podcast, is that this is where attachment is like really interesting and EFT is really informative. How we can get triggered in that duality about longing for and needing reassurance and needing to be like really be together and at the same time need to rely on your survival strategies. And so it just makes sense that at moments you just miss each other's needs. It's a hard balance, I guess, between reconnecting and then being uh, prepared for the next demand. And so in the midst of that, there is an extra vulnerability for getting caught in attachment teams. Yeah. And I think to understand aggression in those warm dynamics that had the dynamic that had nothing to do with power because of the power, but that has a lot to do with like getting overwhelmed and loving each other and at the same time getting caught in anger outbursts. First, I think three main questions are key. And we can, Sue brought them to us with the Hold Me Tight, but the Are You There For Me is the first, and the Am I Good Enough is the other one. Okay. And I would like to add a third one, which is Do I Belong?
Mm.
All right. And because they can to me those questions are different kind of doors that we can open to enter the attachment realm that can help us understand where anger can come from. And depending on which door you take, you will have a different kind of aggression or anger. So if we take the first door and we just open the door that leads us to the team, Are You There For Me? I can imagine that whether you're a military spouse or you're a military man coming back from a mission, I think that context can just like really activate that question. Like, hey, where are you? You've been away and now you're coming home, and I need you to be with me. I need you to be accessible, responsive, engaged. I need you to listen to me. I did this all this weeks, this months. I did it all by myself. Now you're coming home. Will you do the groceries? Will you do the kids? Will you do the laundry? Can you please do that? Because I'm exhausted and I need you to be with me.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah, you feel this is what we know from an attachment perspective. Once that question is active, alive, and our body starts to feel it with all tons of emotions, it just gets us activated. We want to draw the other one's attention. We hyper activate and we make it big. I need you. But imagine that the other one is still in kind of PTSD or in stress or still in the transition. The
Mhm.
body is in the home. but the body travels faster than the mind and the emotions because the body's there, but the emotional system is still like
Hmm.
in a kind of armor, protected. Then you have a body of your husband over there, but not emotionally available because he's still calming down from all the things he or she had to be going through. So the other one will feel you're not there for me. And then, you know what? We will knock on the door. Hey, where are you? Where are you? Hey, this is you. This is you. And what the other one needs is most of the time just some cooling down. No extra mission,
Hmm.
no new missions. I just want to have a place where I just can be feel welcome, where people are there for me, where I can be good, and where I just can really calm down. And now I'm coming in, and all of a sudden, new assignments, a new task.
Yes, very, what you're talking about is so common in the homecoming, especially after a deployment. But I find myself thinking like that same thing happens um, in the lead up to a separation of I
Yes,
feel like when I know you're about to leave, one person's like their mind starts going to the mission and the other one is saying, I need you to be here with me before I'm going to lose you for all this time.
yes,
Um, or even when somebody is gone and there's like a phone call or a Zoom, online meeting, similar thing. The mind is on the mission for the military service member, and the spouse can be like, "But I need you to be present with me and with me in this conversation," and that those are common conflict points for military.
exactly, exactly. I love this how you integrate not only the coming back but also the going away. All right. So, and I think very interesting is that it hits the same spot.
Hmm.
And right now we're just talking about one. Hey,
Yeah.
I need you to be with me. Okay. And what people who get what bodies that where that question gets activated, that body gets activated too. And often what we know from attachment science and what we know from daily practice is that these people tend to activate and protest against the loss of that connection. So they start pointing at, hey, this is the time where we have a Zoom meeting and you're not here. So you should be here. We only have 5 minutes. So please be here. You're not doing it good. You're not providing and giving me what I need in my attachment need. And that hits the second door, which is also a big attachment theme. The one is, are you there for me? But the other one is, am I good enough for you? Am I good enough for you? Am I a good husband? Am I a good wife? Am I a good spouse? Am I okay? And this is where I guess one of my reflections was, what about the split obligations? Because as a human being, we just wanna do good for the ones that are important for us. And our country and the military demands us to be 100% ready and good to provide and serve.
Hmm.
And at the same time, we really want to serve our family too. But you know what? That's a hard thing to do at the same time because they need different skills in order to be good in what you need to do as a in the military. You need to deactivate those elements that you just need to use when you're at home and vice versa. So that's really complicated, okay? You can't be too emotionally present in the midst of some of those exercises or assignments. Okay. And at home, what they want you to be is to be emotionally present. Okay. But how to combine that? Okay. So there is an extra, in the context, an extra vulnerability to be caught up with that question, am I doing good enough for you? And here is another good attachment strategy that we have when we get caught up in with that question, am I doing wrong to you? Am I not doing good enough? Is that we just bunker
Hmm.
emotionally. And that is so normal. It's as if normal. as we protest when we hear that attachment question inside, hey, where are you? Where are you? Where are you? You know, see, it just really hyperactivates. And when we feel like I'm not good enough, I'm not good enough, we tend to hide. And that's what we humans do. Okay. And this is where we go from extra vulnerabilities in that military context, which are it's just extra vulnerable, but I think it's in general human,
Mhm.
leading us to two main attachment teams getting into alarm, leading to normal self-protective moves. And this leads to relational dynamics. Because the more the one withdraws or bunker or deactivates emotionally, the more the other one will feel, see, you're not even there for me, even when we have these 10 minutes before you have to leave. Or you're not there for me, and I was waiting for you like 6 months, and now
Mhm.
you're not here after 2 days. Yeah, even then you're not here. So see, that really gets, and then a kind of dance starts to happen, which Sue talks about a lot, and probably your listeners are probably familiar already with that. That typical dance of like pursuing, withdrawing, and the more the ones try to draw the other one's attention, the more that comes across as critics. And then the more you need to bunker, the more you bunker, and then so on and so on and so on.
Yeah.
But how can that attachment drama, which is related to love, right? Because remember, the main theme is I want you close, but I fight you because you're not close.
Yeah.
I want to be good for you, and I'm high because I feel like not giving you what you need, and that is overwhelming. But there's a lot of love involved. But it's that getting that powerlessness feeling of I can't get you close to me and I can't give you what you need creates such an overwhelming fear. And once you get caught in that dynamic and it keeps on coming, 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 and there's extra stress layers, and especially when there's extra trauma involved, okay, then that level of stress can turn the body to such a powerlessness place where you have no longer words to get across what you're suffering from. You don't have no, there are no words left to say, hey, the way you're trying to approach me is just only letting me feel that I'm worth nothing. I was on a mission, I failed, or mission accomplished, but I failed to provide safety to my brothers. And I'm very sensitive to failing. And now I'm coming back home and I need a place to recover. And I'm still in my bunker. And you're telling me that I'm failing as a father too.
Mm.
That can feel like waterboarding emotionally. When you feel a lot, and what happens from your surroundings is they just keep on telling you it's not okay, it's not okay, it's not okay. And you have no words left to let the other one know, hey, this feels like a waterboarding. You need to stop with giving me that feeling because I'm drowning. So often lashing out, pushing away, leaving, give the other one a push to create some distance from that feeling is the only thing you can do. And that's what we call then in the that little under roadmap that we have in understanding aggression, the aggressive dynamic where I'm talking about that pushing the way is what Levin and I tend to call the distance seeking aggression, is where people get like really overwhelmed with that feeling of like whatever I do, nothing is good, nothing is good. It feels like being pulled underneath the water where you can't breathe. You know, you can hold your breath for a very long time, but
Yeah.
there is every. I mean, you can be trained and skilled in keeping your emotions steady, but everybody needs to breathe at a certain point, and you're very vulnerable to the words and the remarks that the loved ones throw at you. They go right through your armor, right to your heart.
Mm.
And so I think that's a big vulnerable place. And the only way of dealing with it is just to like say, stop. The more you use that distance seeking mode, the more the other one is feeling left alone. Yeah. So the more they start fighting, and also they can become like really powerless. In you come home and there's such a big bunker, and I want to get through you. I want to get through you. So I'm going to do whatever it takes to get through you. This is where I see spouses beating up big man chest, punching, 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 beating, throwing with things, which is a physical act of aggression in a way. But it's not that they want to hurt the other person. It's like, I want to crack your armor. I want to crack your bunker. I want to crack your defense. And with words, nothing seems like nothing gets across. So I have to use a lot of power to crack you, to break you. But the truth is, your words are so effective in entering the body. Because the more powerless you feel, it actually means that your words do really get in the system, but they hurt like hell there in the question, I'm not good enough.
Yeah, I'm just feeling how painful of a spot this is for couples, and I'm thinking how normal. I mean, I suppose there's like one part of me that's like, well, we maybe don't want aggression to happen, but also how normal it would be that if I want to really get through to you, that I might become aggressive in some way to try to get through and to be close again. And that if I'm feeling so overwhelmed with not being good enough, that I would want to be really shut down emotionally, and that then, yeah, I guess I'm just pulling it all together in my mind here, that then would be like, well, you are getting through the bunker, you are getting through the armor or the shutdown, but then it hurts so much because the thing that worked to get through to me was telling me that I'm failing in some way, or even that if that wasn't the intention, that's what I'm hearing. And that's exactly the feeling I'm trying to get away from. So then I might push you away literally, with aggression, to just trying to get the feeling of not being good enough for you to stop.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's well, that's well put, Liz. That's when you reflect it back to me, this is not what listeners will see, but it gives me the goosebumps in from like that sad wavement wave, like because the way you reflected to me and I just lean in listening to you, and there's something with the way you're telling it that you know your voice beams the emotions out of what it is to be in that kind of situation. It's indeed extremely, extremely painful for both of them.
Mhm.
And then at that point, there is a kind of tipping point to the drama because whether you're in that, I don't think we named it yet, but we so far we call it distance seeking aggression, right? But there's also the proximity seeking aggression, right? I will do whatever it takes to get your attention. This is something that we see with little toddlers and little kids. And then we say, oh, it's common. Yeah, it's just he or she is just asking for, in a negative way, for attention. And well, as an adult, it's just the same. Okay, when we get overwhelmed with that question and there is no reassurance, okay, we as adults do that too. So the proximity seeking aggression is like all about proximity, but you feel like driven to that moment where there are no words left, and then you will use wordless communication, which is physical acting out. And that has such a strong impact to the other one that it feels like crossing borders, and then you want them to be close and they turn away from you. So that's where you get like really caught in like big feeling of I have no control here.
Yeah.
And also the other way around. I just wanted you to stop yelling at me. I just wanted you to stop hitting me because the only thing I can hear in what you're saying is that I'm failing. So I want to halt the words and the feeling of failing because I want to do good to you. And now when I use physical force to stop the dynamic, maybe it stopped the dynamic, but now I fall into emptiness. And that's terrible. And then we feel like failing again.
I find myself thinking about how much shame happens also of now we had an aggressive moment between us and how that, I guess is looked down upon, a lot in
Yeah.
society, but
Well,
yeah.
definitely. And this is very interesting because it will also leads us to the third door. Okay. The belonging door and the shame door. Which I mean, it's a very big topic when we start talking about shame because there's so many ways of looking at it. But here what you're saying is I think it just really speaks to a big piece of what shame is all about. Um, what you just said was like, hey, and now here was this incident. And we ourselves have no words to talk about it, but it happened. And so we need to. And then we start talking or we show it or people see it in our environment or we go to our family or friends or a psychotherapist or counselor or somebody who's providing some care and you share that. And it's such a complex thing to understand. It's so difficult to put words around. And the answer is, oh, when that happens, we can't help you. You better leave. It's everybody gets caught up in that, not knowing what to do here. Uh, and so we say leave, but it gives like the idea of looking upon people and just giving the idea like what you've been suffering with, that is not okay and that does not belong to this the problems that we do want to invest in. Okay. It's like a couples therapist saying that to a couple who come in a voluntary way and say, like, the both of us want to work towards those dynamics. And the answer is, well, no, you should leave because we don't want to. It's actually giving the message what you guys are suffering with and the way you function in your relationship does not belong to normal sufferings. So you're abnormal. You
Hmm.
no longer belong. And here's the thing with that no belonging question. I think that's maybe personal, but that's my idea of belonging and attachment. You can suffer with the question, are you there for me? Or you can suffer with the question, am I good enough? But at least that's a question that belongs to a relationship. At least you have a relationship.
Hmm.
But when you receive messages of not being belonging to a bigger group, then you fall into big emptiness. There's no tribe, there is no group. You're abnormal. You don't belong to human beings or military folks or normal couples or whatever. And that leads to attachment panic. That's about that. That's the place where you die. You know, our brain still thinks if I don't belong to my tribe is telling me that I don't belong to, then I have no place and I'm alone in the jungle and I will die.
Yeah.
So what happens then from attachment perspective is that we will try to do whatever it takes to stay out of that feeling. And this is where when we are being ashamed for such a long time and we really start to internalize the feeling of no belonging, withdrawing will not help because the more you withdraw, the more people will say, see, you're just always the lone wolf. The more you fight, people say, yeah, you got an aggressive problem. Then you can just try to, combine both and then or drink but whatever you do, people will say, like, that's not okay. And so what people tend to do then is rely on all kinds of strategies they have, and they will start to mix the withdrawal strategy with the hyperactivated fighting mode, and they will start do all of those things together.
Yeah, I had this picture in my mind of like you had mentioned drowning earlier, but I was remembered, I don't know, at some point in my life being told if I was going to help a drowning person that I had to be careful because they're kind of like flailing. And that's the feeling or like the image that went through my mind when you were saying that they might use um like a bunkering strategy or like a or it like they'll it's like throwing everything. I guess I had another picture of like throwing all the ingredients into this pot like I'm using anything and everything just to try to not be drowning anymore.
Yeah, exactly. And that can be for therapists, but also for friends and family members, that can be very overwhelming because then we all get caught in that powerlessness, right? Because hey, I want to provide help. I just want to and don't fight me. Don't yell at me.
Yeah.
And then again, you get a reinforcing shame loop because once you're in that I don't belong mode, it's really hard to get out of that.
Yeah. Well, I think that takes me kind of naturally to my next question, maybe of like, how do couples get out of this? Like, what if there was a military couple listening to this and they're like, gosh, we really want to repair here. Like, what do we do to even get started on that?
Well, one of the first things is as I try to say to therapists I'm training is like come up with a warm welcome, as we're doing here a little bit in this conversation, which is if people come up and show whether you're a therapist, a sister, a brother, a mother, a social worker, and somebody comes to you, or a good friend, and somebody comes to you, this happened, instead of going like, ooh, now you should leave. This is not okay. This doesn't fit normality. You can say, oh, wow, that must be hard. Well, probably this is maybe hard to understand, but let's sit down. I want to hear your story. And yeah, it's like the warm welcome and offering them a de-shaming answer that could sound like, hey, you know what? We don't talk about it in society, but love and anger can be two sides of the same coin. That really happens a lot. And especially when you're in extreme stressful situations. So yeah, probably you're not alone. Hey, and I'm here for you. Tell me what really happens. Okay. And give people time to say and to let them talk about the incidents. And here is the tricky piece. They will start talking about what the other one did to them. He was so angry. She was so nasty, and she threw, and she was all of a sudden in front of me with scissors in her hand, telling me that she would kill me and that she wished I would die in mission. And whoa, how could you? You were. or the other way around, But people will just start talking about the other, what the other did. Okay. And here is a kind of big pitfall to forget that they're talking about an incident and that we listen to them and reflect everything what they say as if the other one is wrong. No. Okay, so what is most helpful is to say, whoa, that must be very complex that all of a sudden the one that you have been missing for such a long time all of a sudden is yelling at you. That must be so confusing. To keep that ambivalent story alive, and like there's a part where you're loving and now you get caught. Okay, that's the confusing part, right? And if we keep that door open and people feel understood in that confusion, usually we can help them to tune into, hey, and were you angry too? And in what kind of a question or in what kind of attachment door were you caught? Were you having the feeling of not being okay, or did you have that lonely feeling? Nobody was there, or were you suffering with no belonging? So what happened actually to you? And I think that's where I really try to go to with people, with couples or with individuals. Like, welcome the complexity, welcome the stressors, normalize that it activates self-protective attachment strategies, that you get caught in dynamics and cycles. Really try to tune in and look for people like, in your behavior, what's at the heart of the matter? Is that need for proximity, or is that need for some distance because you're overflooded? Or is it the fighting for closeness because you're so lonely? Or are you in a place where you mix them all because you have no belonging anymore? What does it really mean for you? And so, from a therapeutic point of view, I call it find the attachment significance of the aggressive behavior. If it would have a lot of words to express what the aggressive outburst would say, if they only would have the words, what would it say?
Mm,
And so help people to find words to that. Because once they found the words themselves, there's a lot of hope that comes, because they can then they can start using those words in the couple dynamic, and then we can help them express the underlying feelings and needs.
yeah. There's a common phrase, I think, at least with therapists here, like if you can name it, you can tame it. Like kind of like a little saying. And
Yeah.
that's kind of what I'm hearing is that if we can find a name for what's happening emotionally between us that's leading to the aggressive moments, then we can team up and we can do
Mm.
something about it
Yeah.
and maybe communicate about something that before we couldn't communicate about in a different way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I love it. If you can name it, you can tame it. And it's in your last reflection, it's actually in there. But what I like to say is, if you can name it and you make it relational, you
Mm,
can tame it. And in that, make it relational, that's a really interesting element. Okay. So sometimes I know things from myself. Like in my own relationship, sometimes I know, oh, I'm really not dealing with all my emotions pretty well. I'm feeling really insecure. I can name it myself. And as long as if I don't make it explicit or talk to about it in a vulnerable way to my wife, it doesn't change.
mm,
Okay, so there's something with that need of making it relational. Okay, and that's what we can do as couples counselors or couples therapists. But as a friend, as a mother, as a father, as a colleague, as a I don't know what, when you're when somebody from your environment comes to you and they're sharing about those incidents, then they're just already naming it and making it relational. They're making a huge risk. What we can do is instead of act upon it and give them advice, facilitate that process of naming it in a relationship. So the more we listen and not do something immediately, or the more we listen instead of sending them away, the more we are already facilitating that process of naming it relational, and it will lead to people being able to tame it more.
Mm,
So
yeah.
my whole idea is like it's a very complex phenomenon. It's a very difficult thing to work with, yes, but the answer is actually less is more.
Yes, that's what I think that's what I'm taking from what you just said, especially I'm thinking about all the Facebook groups where I see all the types of advice to people, and I'm hearing that if I want to really help my friend or somebody who's going through this, keeping my opinions to myself maybe a little bit, and then helping them kind of emotionally process or emotionally put together what's happening so that way they can name it and then make it relational and sharing about it with their partner. Really.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm sort of wondering if there's anything else for you that feels really important that it gets said for this episode.
You know, what feels important to me is that I feel grateful again, actually, is in like having this conversation with you, Liz, and what comes to me is that I have a kind of conversation with like a lot of people, probably who will listen to this, and I hope I didn't came across as a kind of expert because actually what I feel is like a bit grateful of having the opportunity in like leaning into this world that I don't know. And I wish we had like a kind of dialogue. This is what I would like want us to have to do right now is like, but that's not possible to open up and hear people's reactions and so that we can have a because I'm really learning from this conversation with you and I feel this need of like accepting and just like normalizing, I think, the huge amount of stress that comes with this life and that it's complex and it's also beautiful. I think that will move me listening to all the kinds of story, how much love is involved there. I mean, in love for the country, love for the mission, love for your friends and comrades, but also for your spouses and kids. So we didn't talk about the kids, but of course they're and how much how much investment there's there. I think it would like really give me a warm heart. And in a way, as a European Belgium guy where there is so little military activity and employments and um, I found it really interesting to stand still and learn and have a little bit of a glimpse of how much people are involved in this way of living.
Mhm.
And so I feel like a bit of gratitude.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I feel that similarly, but more so to have you on the podcast and to talk about this when it is so often that people are sort of sent away or can't where it's hard. I've talked about on the podcast before how hard it is within the military context to get help for relationships in general, but the little help that kind of is built into military culture is also not very it is a culture of sending people away and that is I think one of my hopes in having you on this episode is that couples will know that there is hope and that there are people who are trained to help them navigate this and still stay in relationship with each other. Yeah. So thank you for being on the podcast.
Why, thank you for inviting me. Really, we just in Belgium we just released a new book on this. It's in Dutch, so probably your listeners will not be able to access it, and even when they would be able to, not able to read it. But we're really working hard on translation. It will be called Fighting for Love, I guess, and it's in a very simple way, based on 7 returning questions that people ask themselves when they get caught after big incidents, and that even we in the book try to answer it in a very common, accepting, normalizing human way. And so hopefully that I'm working hard to get it translated into English. So
Yeah, I'll see if I can find a link for it to put in the show notes, but certainly once it's in English, I'm like,
I
let
will
me
let you know.
know and I will update the show notes so that way people can find it.
I will let you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Perfect.
Great.
Okay. Thank you
Well,
so
thank
much.
you. As part of this special series on attachment in relationships, I created the ARE quiz. This quiz uses brief accessibility, responsiveness, and engagement scale, which I used in my own dissertation research, and I use with each couple when I start working with them in couples counseling. This quiz helps you and your partner know how secure your relationship is, the level of distress you're in, when you should be considering marriage counseling, and what sort of behaviors you both can work on to help promote the security of your attachment bond. Make sure to check out the show notes to download a copy of the quiz. While I am a therapist, this podcast is for educational purposes only and is not considered therapy. And it should also not be a replacement for therapy. If you think you need a professional of any kind, you should definitely go find one. Until next time.